Good evening, everyone. We are lucky tonight to have Bo Brown, who is actually one of the most popular speakers that will be at the state conference, but he's going to speak to us tonight. So we're very lucky that we get to hear him talk about foraging in the Ozarks. So welcome, Bo.
Hello. Uh, I welcome y'all. I don't know how many people are in this, but I see a few little windows there. Uh, just a little about me. This is my 34th year of teaching this kind of stuff. In 1992, I started a business with a friend. It was First Earth Wilderness School, and we've taught Stone Age wilderness survival skills and foraging since then. And I think 2018, Falcon Guides reached out and asked if I would write the book Foraging the Ozarks. It's a part of they've got up to around 20 books in that series now for foraging of different states and bioregions. And so that book came out in 2020 and did really well because it came out in the middle of COVID and everybody was at home. And then we had the supply chain problems, and people go to grocery stores to empty produce shelves. So it really made the book kind of get really popular for a while. They asked me to do a second one, so I wrote Foraging Central Grasslands because nobody had written one for the prairies and grasslands specifically for that kind of habitat. So I did that. It came out in 2023. And since those books had came out, this is about all I do now is foraging programs. And I did a lot before, but it was did a lot of edible plant walks. I think I did my first speaking engagement about 15 years ago at the Ozark Folk Center, and that was a new thing for me because my whole deal was getting people out away from the screens and out in the wild so they can see these plants in person. So sometimes this is as good as you can get. So I thank you all for showing up for it. Um, if you want to know more about my story and about what I do, my website is at bowbrownforaging.com, and it's got my schedule, my books. There's if you go to the links and resources, there's a list of a bunch of podcasts I've done in the past few years about telling kind of how I got here and all that kind of business. So anyway, this presentation tonight, I'm going to do a different one. I talked to Michael. He said, I asked him if I should do the same one here and the conference, and he said, no, I'll do something different. So I chose this one because it's more of an introductory course of all the reasons you should be foraging. And then when you come to the conference, we'll get more in the weeds, so to speak, about the individual plants and what to do with them and that kind of stuff. So I had to do this half of a 2 day event at the Ozark Folk Center, which half of it was a walk. I've done plenty of those before, but the second half was a seminar, and I had never done that before. So I just pulled something out of my you know what and thought, okay, I'll do wild food versus industrial food. And when I got to digging on it, turns out that there's a lot of real interesting info about how we used to live as hunter gatherers compared to what we eat now. So as we go through this, there'll be a lot of reading. I'll just let you guys read it on your own, and then you can pop in with questions at any time. But we'll get through this pretty quickly, and then I do have some props that I brought. Just we can talk about individual foods and how to prepare them and things like that. I've got a few things like fermented goods, dehydrated mushrooms, wild vinegars, wild fruit syrups, that kind of stuff. I'm constantly collecting things throughout the year and preserving them so I can eat wild food year round. And there's easy ways to do that. In fact, one of my PowerPoints is on just that subject. And this fall we'll be doing a weekend of food preservation. There's a place here in Springfield, the Wild Arts Learning Center. You can find her information on that links and resources page at my website. But we are doing a 2 day thing, one day on canning and then another day of me doing all the preservation methods that I've done in the past. So anyway, let's get started on this thing, and I guess you can just break in and pop questions in after you've gone through a bit. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I don't guess I need to read this, and since you all have this same thing on your screen, a lot of good reasons to do this kind of stuff. And that first one is there's some real eye-opening things that I found out about that, about just how few edible plants we eat nowadays compared to what we did as hunter-gatherers. And I'll get into more of that a little bit. So everybody's done with that.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's a lot of stuff that we just do not use anymore that were the staples of our existence, or Native Americans before white people even got here. Acorns were one of them. And there's just a stigma about prepping acorns to eat, that it's going to be too time consuming, too difficult. Uh, it's not. It's really pretty simple. Uh, Ragweed. When I put my uh, grasslands book out, excuse me, there was no other foraging book out there that mentioned ragweed, and yet it was grown, it was cultivated in the U.S. over 4,000 years ago as part of the Eastern Agricultural Complex. The seeds are something like 47% crude protein, and I worked in archaeology for about 10 years, and they said that every site that they looked at around here, the fire pits had uh, charred remnants of ragweed seeds. You might not be familiar with the other one. The other two, you can buy sunchokes in the store, so you might know that one. But the other one is the native name for it is hopness. Most people call it groundnut or Apios americana, and it would probably be into production if it didn't have such a long growth cycle. It takes it up to 2 years to 2 to 3 years to get any good size to it, to the tubers. But the nutrition profile on those are just off the charts. So they're really, really nutritious. The natives would dry them out and then pound them to a powder and add water to it to make flour. They roast them. They could be used just about any way you'd use any other tuber. So, any questions? Oh, come on, you got a question. Are y'all familiar with those plants? The groundnut.
No.
That's
No.
Yeah, that's one that you have to go around springs. Usually, I see it close to water. But yeah, we have a lot of the. They're trying to get away from calling tuberous sunflower. Jerusalem artichoke was the common name forever, but it's not from Jerusalem and it's not an artichoke. So the new term they're trying to use is tuberous sunflower, or sunroot. I've heard that used before because it's sunflower and you eat the root. There's another related one that's a really beautiful prairie plant. It's a Maximilian sunflower, and it gets like 12, 13, 14 feet tall. It's usually a single stem with very long lanceolate leaves, and it's just a really graceful plant with a small kind of yellow sunflowers branched out at the top, and it has tubers just like that. But it hadn't been domesticated to get the real huge ones like the sunchoke has. So anyway, go next. This is what I turned up that was was kind of shocking, was that in all of the selective breeding that we have done for 10 to 12,000 years, even in Europe, um, that most of our vegetables come from, we have really bred out the nutrient density, the vitamin content, and the medicinal compounds to get something that's sweeter, larger, milder, easier to grow. So it's just shocking. A friend of mine did foraging walks in the produce aisle in California to talk about plant families, because in the wild you're eating, I mean, hundreds of species as a hunter gatherer, and dozens of plant families. And when you go to the grocery store, most of what you're going to buy is from 9 plant families. So that's just incredibly small variety compared to what you would get if you were going out. There's entire plant families that have absolutely no representation of anything you can buy at a even in a farmer's market. You might get a few things that'll pop up, like some people will sell purslane, or there's a few things like that that'll pop up. But so it's really astounding how many species we're missing out on by not learning what's just right under our feet and just all over the place. So there's no labels on this, but the center of that is hackberries, and the larger nuts are hazelnuts. Two of my favorites. Hackberries, I'll talk a little bit about those. It has a very distinct bark, very ridged bark, and the individual ridges have like they're stacked with concentric lines of little stacked woody growth as they grow out. If you take a picture of one and then of the side of a tree and then turn it horizontally, it looks like a landscape in Utah with buttes and stuff. It's kind of funny. But the hackberries, I grew up eating those things, and I didn't know about the center part. The outer part is a sweet, kind of a dry, fleshy coating around a hard, round seed. And if you try to bite that seed, it'd just break your teeth. But so I just chew the sweet stuff off and spit them out. It wasn't until about 15 years ago I was reading about the old forager author, um, Yule Gibbons. And he did an interview, and he said that somebody taught him how to make hackberry candy bars using the whole berry, and that's what got him into foraging. He learned this when he was a kid. I think he said it was the first recipe he ever wrote at 8 years old or something like that. But you take the whole berry, and in my book, I have a picture of that. If you bust open the little hard nut on the inside, it's full of a fatty ball of just oily, sweet, like a nut meat kind of a thing that surrounds the germ. And so if you just pulverize the entire berry, it turns to a stiff cookie dough texture because there's so much oil in that. So the idea is you just pound and pound and pound and pulverize it to get to bust up all the little woody bits. And then you add some dried, like really finely chopped dried fruits and nuts, and a little honey for a binder, and then roll it out thin between wax paper or something like that, and then let it dry for candy bars. And that recipe's in my book. I kind of uh, fixed it up a little bit from his original recipe. But anyway, I found out they are shelf stable because I forgot about one and left it on my counter in plastic wrap. And it was under something for about a year. And then I found it, and it was hard as rock. I was ready to pitch it. And I thought, well, I wonder what the microwave would do. About 10 seconds in the microwave, and it was exactly like whenever I put it up there. Um, there's some kind of antibacterial thing. I did the same thing with a ball of the pulverized nuts. Uh, I, just beat them up real bad. And also when you're making those candy bars, if you just make them fresh, it is kind of, there's a little crunchiness in there, so you don't want to bite down real hard. You will get some of those little hard nut fragments. But this trick I learned accidentally. But like I said, I put it in my refrigerator, made a big ball out of it, wrapped it in plastic wrap, and left it in there for 10 months or something like that. Buried it up with other food experiments. And when I got it out, it was perfect. And when I just heated it up a little bit to roll it out, and in thin and make the actual candy bars with it. And the little nut bits had softened in that length of time. So that's turned out to be a nice little tip to make it where you don't have as much of the little gritty texture to it from the hard nut bits. So anyway, any questions?
There is a question
Oh,
in the chat.
yes.
Carolyn wants to know, are there only specific acorns that can be eaten? And are some better than others?
Yes, by all means. The white oak group, if you guys are naturalists, you know this stuff. There's two general groups of oaks. There's the red oak group and the white oak group. And typically the white oak group has a lot less tannins, which is the bitter part that you have to leach out, either hot water or cold water leaching. So if you're going to make flour, those are the ones you would pick. And my favorite is bur oak because you get a lot more bang for your buck in shelling time. They're just so huge. But I've used all the other white oaks, just the white oak species. I've used what was it, post oak. And my post oaks one year came out very colorful. The acorns are all red and purplish, and the smallest one is chinkapin oak, and it is probably the mildest one. I mean, it's mild enough that you can eat it without, you can roast those just without leaching them. You don't want to eat a lot of them because even though they're not bitter with tannins, they still have antinutrients that won't sit well in your stomach. But anyway, they are, when they're ripe, sometimes they get purple. They're beautiful, but they're tiny. So there's a lot of processing time there. So as far as the red oak group, those are best for oil. They're a lot more, they have a lot more tannins, but they also contain a lot more oils. So the natives would prefer those to make oil with. They would mash up the nut meats and then put it in water and simmer it and skim the oil off that floats. And if you have an oil press like a nut press, that they work really well for that. You can still leach them like you do the white oak acorns. It will just take longer and more leaching time. And we can go into the process, but if you have my book, I go into it in a little bit of detail. More so in the grasslands book, I think. But that answer your question?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Anything else? Let's move along.
And he can, if you guys do have questions,
He can hear us.
he can hear us. So feel free to stand up. Okay, so we do. So maybe just stand up so you project better.
I have one question, which is hackberries are really tall. How do you get all hackberries berries in your bowl and off the tree?
Well, I look for smaller trees for one thing that you can reach. There's that we have another species. There's Celtis occidentalis. That's the western hackberry, but I don't know if you have it up there. But we also have dwarf hackberry. I think it's levigatus. But anyway, it's a shrub. It doesn't get, usually don't see it much over 15 feet tall, 20 feet tall or so, and you can really reach up high and pull those over and clean them out. And the berries are just about the same size as they are on the western hackberry. The other thing I've done is just lay down a sheet, get a big tall stick or pole, and just beat on the limbs and try to knock as many down as I can. Or you can collect, these things can be collected long into the winter. They will dry and persist on the trees if birds don't get them. And then after a windstorm, they're just like wild grapes. When the grapes are ripe and way up the trees, you wait till after a big windstorm and then you go out and check for the ground fall. And there's almost always just lots of them, sometimes whole, little limbs with the ends of them, with a lot of hackberries. But yeah, that's always a problem when you're around a park like area where the only hackberries you see are the big giant old ones. A lot of times people just set down plastic, like a bunch of plastic sheeting, visqueen, I think they used to call it, but they'll just put that all under the trees when they start to drop. And that way you can just let them collect up and come and get them before critters do every night. So,
Any
right.
other?
I have a question. So do you forage all year long, or do you have a favorite season for foraging?
Yeah, I do. Um, every month has a specialty thing. Even in the middle of the winter, I get in my kayak and I go to Springfield Lake, and there's some real low-lying areas that are close to the water, and they're in the floodplain, so they do get flooded occasionally. But there's oyster mushrooms that grow all winter long, and oyster mushrooms are, I think, the winter oysters are preferable to they're just meatier, they're darker, they're just, I think they're better than the ones you get in the summer. Um, for the here in Springfield, we have the Springfield Area Herb Society, and I've done a seasonal walk for those folks at least for 16, 17 years now. We'll do a spring, a summer, and a fall at Busick Conservation Area, a little bit south of Springfield. And in about 8 or 9 years ago, one of them suggested, why don't we do a midwinter walk just to see? And I figured I'd at least be able to identify plants from their crispy dead remains and look at tree bark and stuff like that. I was blown away by how much green there was at the bases of bluffs where it kind of hang on to moisture there, and plus it soaks up the heat from the sun and kind of feeds it back overnight, so it probably keeps it from the ground from freezing as hard. I found it around bases of like building foundations, around springs, protected areas. Sometimes you have to scrape the leaf litter back, and you can find chickweed and hairy bittercress, and a lot of them are the introduced European plants that are used to that cooler, wetter weather. And those things you'll find, dandelions, another one. You'll find those things all winter long. So yeah, it's every season has a thing. That's why, as a hunter gatherer, you got the spring where you got all the greens. You're getting a lot of greens and stuff. Then later on, those start to dry out a little bit, and then you're into the berry season, and it starts with service berries and gooseberries, and then you get into the wild plums, and there's a whole progression, and it's sometimes they're at the same time, sometimes they're kind of spread out. So you got stuff along berry season, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries really early. They one of the early ones too, but they're hard to find. But then a little bit later, and you start getting the bigger fruits like persimmons, pawpaws, that kind of stuff, that are in late fall, or I mean late summer to early fall. And in fall, October and stuff, that's your nut season. So, and then, like I said, all winter long, you got roots. A lot of the root plants. That's the time to get them. You don't want to get them when they still got green parts, like Sagittaria. A lot of the aquatic plants, like lotus, they call it arrowhead, I guess, Sagittaria, pond lily. Oh gosh, there's a whole list of them. And anyway, the winter is a good time to get those things. So it's an ongoing thing, and if the more you know, the more you can stay busy. With me teaching so much, I don't have the opportunity to. I'd just be out there every day collecting if I could. But even with the time I do have, I manage to have enough that I can have at least every week have some kind of a main side dish or something that is foraged. Uh, and with that and the mushrooms, at least weekly, sometimes every day. Like right now, I'm eating watercress and greens and stuff literally every day. Uh, and I forage my meat. If you want to hear the story on that, go to it's called the Ozarks podcast. It's on the links and resources page of my website. These guys did a two-part uh, hour-long podcast. First one was on foraging, and the second was on Stone Age wilderness survival skills. So anyway, that I talked to, they said, "What about meat? Do you hunt?" And I said, "Well, not anymore. I don't have the time since about 9 years ago when I got busy. But I pick up roadkill, and it's very easy source. Everybody's always grossed out, but I learned a long time ago. I teach at these big primitive skills gatherings out west. The big one is called Rabbit Stick in Idaho, and there's another one that's almost as big in Arizona called Winter Count. And these are up to 700 people at the event with 80 to 100 instructors. And one of the instructors there, they call him Roadkill. He was an absolute expert on how bad meat has to be before it's actually dangerous. And our perception of that is just way wrong. If eating unrefrigerated meat killed people, we would never survived as a species. You go to any third world country and go to the meat market, and it's stuff that's just not refrigerated. It's been hanging up there for a week. It's there's ways to do this. Even some of the old road to this is going to gross some people out, I'll tell you. But it's when I've got one that's laid out in warmer temperatures, a lot of times I'm harvesting the skin because I taught hide tanning for a lot of years and I just needed the skin. But if I get the skin off and the meat looks good, I'll cut off a haunch, cut into check out the backstrap tenderloins. But I found a few places that where it starts turning green. And I was always, that one's too far gone. Now, after talking to Jeff, he said you can cut in about an inch, like the top layer of that where it's been exposed to the heat, and get down into where it's still red, cut a little cube of it out and get it away from the stinking carcass and smell it. And if it smells good, it's good to eat. The only way bacteria is on the inside of the muscle mass, it is sterile. So bacteria cannot get in there to spoil unless it's been punctured to introduce the bacteria. So it's I eat a lot of stuff that probably a lot of people wouldn't, and it is amazing food. I mean, it's just the same as if you had gone out and shot the thing, and that's a big thing here in the Ozarks of deer hunting. Some of the rural schools close down during deer season because there's nobody there. All the kids are out in their deer stands and whatnot. So, but yeah, it's a life choice, and people said, well, it just takes so much time to do all this kind of stuff. Well, how much time do you spend at your job making your money so you can go buy food in the store that's substandard, that's not going to have anywhere near the amount of phytonutrients and just good stuff in it that this wild stuff does. So it's how can you work it into your life? And you don't have to become a full-time forager, but just get a book, get mine. There's a lot of books out there. There's plant identification apps now. I don't think I covered that in this talk, but there are several out there now. A lot of people are using their Google. That's not very good. There's several out there that you don't trust the AI, what is it, Grok, or one of the I can't remember, Chat GBT. People have been using those things to ID plants, and several times they've identified very toxic mushrooms as edible. In fact, I just saw a meme about that. But there is one that stands above the rest as far as plant identification apps. It's called Picture This, and it's a paid app. And I probably shouldn't tell you this, but there's a way around having to pay for it. When you open it up, it'll open up to the screen to start your free trial. And then it's not much, like $30 a year, I think. But if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, there's kind of a hidden X. And if you click that X, it just takes you right to the page, and you can take your picture of the plant you've taken and run it through there. And it's got a better track record than any of the other apps I've tried. But still, never trust the app, never trust a foraging site. There's a lot of activity on some of the foraging groups. There's one called Missouri Wild Food Foraging. There's a lot of posts on there. There's a lot of just not regional, but more national or big regional groups like Southeastern foraging. There's some for the upper Midwest. But if you put a plant up there and ask for an ID, you might get a dozen wrong guesses before the moderators come in and say, no, that's toxic. Don't eat that. That's not what you're saying it is. So books are always the best go-to for accurate information because they have editors. There's no editors on the internet. It's just all content creators, and a lot of times they don't know what they're talking about. Um, and there's if you need a list of resources other than my two books, I can provide that after the talk or whatever. There's some really good books out there. Samuel Thayer is my favorite author. I got to teach with him last year in Wisconsin. It's the largest wild food event called the Midwest Wild Harvest Festival, and it's the first, I think, first or second weekend of September. And he's got 4 books out, and his most recent book, probably, well, it's over in my bookcase. It covers 700 species, and it's about 2.5 inch, 3 inches thick. It's huge, but I messaged him after that and I said, you just negated the need for me to ever write another book because he covered just every plant I ever thought I knew. And so anyway, but that's, you don't need that until you've probably got into this a while. How many people out there are already foraging? None?
Got about 10 in the room,
10? That's awesome. Yeah, well, I should have expected that from this group. I've done a actually multiple programs for the Missouri Master Naturalist. I did one in Springfield years ago, but it was on Stone Age wilderness survival skills. And then I've done them for the Arkansas Master Naturalist a long time ago. Did a plant walk for them. But it's always a great group, and there's always people that have a ton of knowledge and are anxious to learn about this. So I'm happy to be here with y'all. So any more questions?
I have a quick question. Do you have any foraging calendars for the Ozarks for this area that you might recommend?
The closest I know is in my book. It's in the back of the book. If you don't have my book and you're into this kind of stuff, you should have that book. It's the only one that's regional to this area. But in the appendix, I think it's Appendix B, there is a list of plants by food type, and it's roughly categorized in by season. And it's more or less what I just said. Your spring greens are going to be, that's going to be in the spring, and then your pot herb greens are a little bit later than your berry. It's that kind of really rough categorization. There's no actual calendar because it is so variable depending on the weather and I mean both temperature and moisture. And things that I've expected to see in March sometimes don't get here till late April. Things that I expect to see in late April show up in March. It's just things are all over the place now. So, with our erratic weather, so I don't know that an actual month by month calendar. Even the conservation department has the natural events calendar. I'm looking at it right here, and it's even that. It'll have certain things like watch for morning cloaks and comma butterflies on warm days on January the 20th, things like that. And anyway, any of that stuff is just can be 3 weeks off now. I mean, it always has been to a certain degree, but I think with just the weird things that are going on, there's absolutely no denying that we are in a climate crisis. And my property, where I teach my classes, I have 10 acres in the middle of the 8,000-acre state lead mine state forest up an hour north of Springfield, and a segment of the Niangua River goes through that. And I've got riverfront property there, and that river is unrecognizable from what it was 10 years ago. And I've had it since 1990. And it changed a little bit through those years, but in the past 10 to 12 years, just with extreme flood after flood, we've had, I don't know how many years in a row we had the 100 to 500 year floods. 93 was the first big flood, and then we didn't have another one until I started about 10 or 12 years ago, and now it's every single year. And it has just radically changed the plants that I find. There's so much disturbance from the floods that I mean, it just radically changed the biology of the thing. So, any other questions?
Yep, go ahead. What percentage more or less of your own diet is foraged, and do you also grow a garden, and ballpark, what percentage of food do you buy?
It depends on the time of year. There's sometimes like if I've got free time, I'd say right now, it's probably 50, 50, maybe sometimes more or so. It just, if I'm really busy and I don't have time to get out and forage, of course, I'll go to the store and buy, regular, regular people food. But just about at least every week, if not every day right now. And like I said, the percentages change from the time of year. Uh, and as far as a garden, I live in a forested gravel hillside and there's no soil or enough sunlight. I've even tried to grow tomatoes and peppers in the down the hill at the most sunny spot that I have, and I had to put a chain link fence around because the deer kept eating everything. But those just didn't get enough sunlight. But I have an incredible amount of food here. I mean, it's just I can't grow anything but what wants to go here. And I can walk out my yard right now and probably within 20 or 30, 50 feet or so, find at least 20 edible species. And some of it, I know that it has come in with me. It's just like the Native Americans did whenever they were out kind of combing the countryside to forage. Then they came back to their camp. Well, when they were processing, just in the process of having the plants there, sometimes seeds there, they're pitching things out, and they would have these almost unnatural concentrations of edible food plants in their campsites. And a lot of these campsites were close to a confluence of a spring, a creek, or two creeks, or, find the flattest area out of the floodplain that's close to a confluence. And almost always you'll find evidence of that it was a long-term, it wasn't occupied constantly, but it was used over and over. And you'll find a groundhog hole and look around the backfill that he dug out of there. And there almost every time I find that situation, I'll find flakes in those backfill from the groundhog where he's turned up stuff. So they did that, and I think a lot of my plants here might have something to do with it. But some of the more rare stuff that I have to go to specific locations that I would never expect to see right here turn up here. There's one called honewort. It's oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the Latin name of it, but it's in the carrot family. I only see it around springs, and another one is called anise root. I think it's Osmeriza longistylis. They also call it sweet Sicily. That's here. It shouldn't be here, I did the first time I've ever done an actual foraging walk here was about 5 years ago, I think. I normally have my wilderness survival classes and a lot of my foraging classes up my property, just because the diversity is insane. And my record number of species in one salad up there was 27 species in one salad, and that's just the greens. And anyway, I had this group here that my property up there flooded out, and I'm having to call people that are coming in from Kansas City, St. Louis. They're in the in transit coming here, and my assistant called and said, "Yeah, the road into your place under 4 feet of water." So I was having to tell everybody to come here to my cabin, and so we ended up. I've got a little wet weather creek down here, so we started the plant walk there, and it's less than 250 yards or so from that little wet weather creek up to my yard, and then I've got a power line cut that runs north and south coming out of my cabin, and just in that little area of 200-300 spaces, I found 34 species of edible plants that went into that salad, and I tallied it up and put them into individual plant families, and there were 21 plant families, and I think 10 of those were families you could not buy representative in the store. Like I was talking earlier, there was nothing store bought even that in that entire family. So it just tells you there's a lot more food out there than we're aware of. And as long as I've been doing this, I still find plants that have been designated as toxic, or they just never made it into the foraging literature for one reason or another. Somebody thought they didn't taste very good, or maybe somebody had it and got a reaction to it. But I'm just finding every month, it seems like I find a new plant, or at least a part of a plant I've known forever, and a new way to do it. So the science on this is really moving quickly as more people get into it and do their own experimentation. Um, there's, like I said, about plants being toxic, or being listed as toxic. There's one, I think it's Notoscordum bivalve of false wild garlic. Y'all familiar with that one? It's a spring wildflower. It's blooming right now. It looks a little bit like garlic. Um, the flowers do, and it's got long, slender leaves, but it's not an allium species. And all the books that I had said that plant was toxic, and it's even listed as toxic in my Foraging the Ozarks book. And in the process of writing the Grasslands book, I really dove into, what are the toxins that are in this plant that makes it so that you shouldn't eat it. And when I got to that one, and then this happened with several other plants, I'll dig into it, and there's no identified toxin associated with it. But it's not recommended as edible. And I've tasted them a bunch. Just, I'll taste everything just about, just to see what it's, if there's a bitterness or a off taste or one thing, or why people aren't eating the thing. And this thing tasted mild. It had a the bulb had a very slight kind of onion odor to it. Nothing like wild garlic. But Sam Thayer reached out to me and said he was looking into the same thing, and he said, I can't find this toxin that's supposed to be make this plant toxic. And so we both dug more into it. Well, he turned up a story from the first settlers, or in the colonies, I guess, that you could take the juice of that bulb, and juice it out and smear the juice on your chickens' heads. And if a crow attacked your chicken, it would kill the crow, which is bunk, but it got the name crow poison. They started calling it crow poison from that myth. And so all these years, that plant has been considered toxic because of a myth that it's toxic because it's supposed to kill crows. And another link to that story was that he had come across an introduced very similar relative to that one. It's Nothoscordum gracile, which is slender false wild garlic. And anyway, it's native to South America. So he looked up in the references there, and they eat the heck out of it. And it looks just like ours here. And like I said, the leaves are just a little more slender. The flowers, I don't think you could tell the difference in the flowers, but it's just funny things like that turn up, that what gets plants listed as non-toxic, or as toxic, or not good food. And my idea is everything, if it's not toxic, it's edible. And my goal is to find out how to use that plant in adding it to the food I eat, store-bought food, whatever. Find out the plants, the other foods that thing goes with, that where that off-putting or strong flavor is a feature, not a bug. Where it really makes the dish pop. There's a guy, if you're into the culinary aspect of this, there's two people y'all ought to get to know. Alan Burgo, the forager chef, he's got a book out called Flora, but he also you can sign up for his blog at his website at the foragerchef.com, and he sends out a weekly recipe of wild food of some kind. So it's really a neat thing to learn about this stuff. You're not knee deep in it already. The other guy is Pascal Badar. I think it's spelled Badaur. And or maybe Baudar. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, Pascal is the first name. His first book was uh, The New Wildcrafted Cuisine. And I think the subtitle was Exploring the Exotic Gastronomy of Your Local Terroir. I had to look that up. I didn't know what that meant. And if you didn't know he was a Belgian living in California, you'd kind of guess that after the book title. But he's very active. He does webinars. He does live teaching. He did a road trip, and he came through Missouri. And I was all set up to hook up with him and do a foraging walk. And he ended up having a family emergency at home, and he had to cut his trip short. But he got into it, the foraging, the same way I did, through primitive skills and through Stone Age skill stuff. And on their outings, they would just, and that was my focus for a lot of years in teaching, was I was just interested in what I could eat while I'm out there, because we'd do these 8, 10 day trips out, take enough food for maybe 3 days, and then just have to live on what we found out there. They ate a lot of grasshoppers, crayfish, just whatever we could find, and along with all the plant stuff. And anyway, that's how he came across it. And then when he did his tour, he he's a big pottery guy, so he went everywhere digging local clays, and he had a portable kiln in his van, and he would fire clays and make his own fermentation vessels to ferment a lot of the plants he was collecting along the way, all this new stuff that he didn't get exposed to in California. So anyway, those two names are really good into the culinary aspect of it. So anything else?
There's one more question in the chat.
Yes.
Is there any concern about watercress and water of unknown quality?
Well, the watercress I'm currently eating is right along East Sunshine, east of Springfield. There's a church sitting on the bluff that this thing comes out of, and the spring that I grew up eating from was down from a pasture that had cows. I mean, literally, you could throw a rock from where the spring was and hit cows. And we collected that stuff every year. And sometimes the cows would get loose and be in the spring. And the key is that if you're worried about bacteria, do a 50-50 vinegar water rinse, and that will kill the bacteria. I don't think some people were worried about liver flukes. There's a liver fluke. I'm not sure about this, but I think its vector is a snail, and it can attach itself to the submerged parts of the plant. So I do advise people to pick above the water line, like at least a couple of 3 inches above the water line. And but the cases of that liver fluke of people getting infected from eating watercress has only come from I think California, Texas, and Hawaii. So I mean, liver flukes are here. They're a lot more common in cows. People getting them from watercress is extremely rare. And as far as the bacteria, like I said, a lot of times I don't even bother. I mean, I caution people, don't do what I do here. But if it's been rained on recently, that's good enough for me. I don't even rinse it. I just pick it and eat it. I do, like I said, whenever I'm making a salad, if I'm eating it fresh in a salad, I'm going to make a vinaigrette dressing out of my wild vinegars with a little bit of wild fruit syrup. So I think you have to get to around 5% vinegar, or 5% acidity rather, to get to the point where it's killed the bacteria. And so and the way we traditionally ate the watercress was in a wilted watercress salad with bacon grease and bacon bits, and with a little splash of white vinegar, salt, and pepper, and that was it. And I think between the hot grease and the vinegar, and the fact that the well that we had, my well growing up was like 50 feet deep, so never passed a water test. So that's kind of me and that kind of water. I've not had much problems with that. But people living on city water, where you're drinking water that nothing can live in, you don't have the gut biome to process that kind of bacteria. Same thing with when we go to Mexico. We don't have the, people down there can drink water that if we drank it, it would give us what do they call it, Montezuma's revenge. And but it's eating a lot of fermented foods also, and I just learned about this stuff about in the past 10 years. I think that really improves your gut biome where you don't get bothered by things like that. So, and we can talk a little bit about that when we get further because I've got some props to show you when we get to the end of this stuff, and I've got at least one or two different vinegars I can show you. So, yeah, it's
Sorry, Bo, we have 8 minutes left for Q&A. So if you want to show us some stuff.
Yeah,
I
think we've been doing.
Yeah, no, 100%, yeah, exactly. So should we switch to putting you on the screen if you wanted to?
let's just go through so everybody can read because there's some pretty good factual stuff right there. That there's some new information for me there about how every plant has a fungal associate and how important that is to the soil biome for these plants to grow. So read that little thing there. Just go ahead and whip through these last few plates, and then we'll do that part. Next. Yeah, this is important stuff here. This is the how to forage and not impact the wild stuff. I'm getting a lot of questions about, well, are you out there just eating everything and destroying the habitat? This talks about that. And as soon as everybody's done with that, you can hit the next one. There's a real popular book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and this is her from her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. Yep. There we go. And that's my website. If you need to know more about it, buy my books. They're on Amazon. They're on all the other online sellers, but Jeff Bezos is rich enough and he won't sign your books, and I will. So that dish on the left, those patties are smash fried sunchoke tubers in panko with chanterelle mushroom gravy and a wild salad. That was one of the best things I've ever come up with. So let me get some of these things out. So I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm just showing you a big jar of watercress kimchi. And that's one of the things that I love doing with any kind of plant, any kind of wild plant. For the longest time, I had no interest in fermenting store-bought food. It's very easy to do. And if you want to try this at home, just start with carrots, turnips, Brussels sprouts, throw a few onions, garlic in there for flavor. If you like heat, throw a tablespoon of chili garlic sauce. But just pack the jar full, and the brine you cover it with is 1 tablespoon of non-iodized salt per 2 cups of non-chlorinated water. And however you make that happen, I use sea salt or Redmond's or anything that's just not iodized salt. And then I use my tap water from my well here. But you just basically cram the jar full of ingredients, top it with the brine, cap it, and they start fermenting overnight. This one is on its fourth day. It was done yesterday. Takes 4 days to ferment them in the brine like that. You know, you got sometimes weeks if you're doing the traditional sauerkraut method to get the same result. And it just, every plant contains lactobacillus, and in a salt environment, it kills all the other bacteria and lets the lactobacillus do its thing, which makes it sour and changes the texture a little bit, makes it softer. Just, they used to call that refrigerator pickles because you fermented them, and then but if there's no vinegar, you do not put vinegar in any of these, that will stop the fermentation. So, and I've done it with some really plants that people like to hate, like perilla. Um, done it with dock, patience dock, and curly dock. Dock shoots are amazing. If you get they're coming up right now. Either patience dock is the bed. If you're not familiar with that one, it's Rumex potentia, and it's got bigger, fleshier leaves and has no bitterness like the curly dock and the broadleaf dock. And if I can find it, I prefer it, but I'll use curly dock if not. The other ones are a little more bitter, but you can still work. So that's one thing you can do. Um, Talked about mushrooms. We got a couple of these are, I don't know if you can see that or not, or this is worth even doing, but they're just jars of dehydrated mushrooms. These are lobsters, and I believe these are honey mushrooms. So anytime I find mushrooms, I eat a bunch right then, and then if I've got extra, I will stick them in the dehydrator. If you don't have a dehydrator and you want to go cheap, just go to the Restore or somewhere, or find an old screen, a window, like a wire mesh window screen from a storm door, and prop it up on bricks and put a fan on it. Just keep air moving over it. It will. I use that when I've got huge amounts because it'll be multiple loads in my old Excalibur dehydrator. And if I got a whole bunch, like a chicken of the woods mushroom that weighs 20 pounds or something like that, and I'm trying to do a lot, I'll get out the screen and just do a bunch at once and jar it up, and then it's good to go. Uh, then what else do I have here? Oh, one of my favorite things to do that's not a fruit. This is shagbark hickory bark syrup. You collect the bark off the shagbark, the plates that detach easily. Try to find the ones with the least amount of lichens. Scrub those off if you can. Just kind of wash them with a brush. Roast them in the oven for about 30, 40 minutes, for 35, 40, something like that. Your house will fill full of the most sweet, aromatic hickory smell you've ever smelled. Then break those up, put them in a pan of water, or put them in a pan, barely cover them with water, and simmer that for about another 45 minutes. Uh, Not if you get it too dark, it'll be a little bitter, but it should be about a dark whiskey colored, like a real dark tea. Then you take and do a reduction of that tea with sugar, and it's like pouring the woods over your pancakes. It's got that hickory smoked flavor. I use it for a meat marinade. You can put it in. I drink a lot of those uh, uh, carbonated drinks like LaCroix. If I want a little sweetener in there, I'll put some of that in there, and it's just amazing on anything. So while I'm talking syrups, oh, this is another vinegar. This one is, I believe that's maypop vinegar, and the maypop is the purple passion flower fruit. So any kind of fruit, as you're processing them, and that's in the book also. It's in the grassland book actually. There's a recipe for wild vinegar and for wild fruit syrup, and I go through a ton of wild vinegar. I cannot drink. I just don't like apple cider vinegar after making my own. It's just too sharp. I can't taste any fruit in it. With these wild vinegars, you can actually taste the fruit. You can cap them off and have them mild, or keep letting them go, and they'll get more tart as they age. But they're just gorgeous to work with, and like I said, they really add a flavor profile to a salad dressing or whatever you're using it in that you'll never get with apple cider vinegar. Very easy process. And it's mostly done with scraps and fruits that are a little bit too far gone to eat. That maypop, I'd say about a third of the batch where they were dried out and didn't have much flesh left in them, so that went into the mix. But and fruit syrups. This is pokeberry. I don't know. There you can't see colors very well, but the color on that stuff here, it's it's like that is the most god awful magenta purple color, and I use that as a syrup in my vinaigrette dressings. Do I hear anybody freaking out about using pokeberries?
Gonna ask about it, yeah.
The seeds are toxic. So when you make the syrup, you process the seed, you run it through a strainer after you've juiced them. Uh, all my fruit syrups I treat pretty much the same way. I'll just put the fruits in a pan, barely cover them with water, heat them up a little bit. With pokeberries, I'll cook them a little bit. Some berries I try not to even boil, like elderberries, because I want to capture all the vitamin C and all the other volatile things that are in there that if you boil it, it will take those away. So, but you just mash them up with a flat potato masher. Then I'll press them through a wire bowl strainer, and that gets rid of the seeds. And then the juice that's left over, that's what I'll put a little water in it. And if I want to make a quicker reduction rather than just using sugar, and this is a lower sugar version, I'll replace about half the sugar, cut about half the amount of sugar I would if I'm just doing a sugar reduction, and use a little stevia and a tablespoon or teaspoon or so of fruit pectin. Not enough to thicken it into jelly, because I quit making jelly about 10 years ago because it's good for spreading on bread and crackers. But with the syrup, you can make meat sauces, meat drizzles, drizzle it over ice cream. There's just so many more utilitarian uses for a syrup, for a flavoring syrup, than there is a jelly. So, and then, like I said, the cooking and removing the seeds makes the pokeberry juice perfectly edible. I grew up, my mom made pokeberry wine when I was a kid, and I wondered why everybody said they were toxic. She actually she'd eat a pokeberry seed one a day when they were out, just because she said it helped her arthritis. And then it turned out that was the Cherokee were real fond of doing that. They had a dosage, like one the first day, to the second, up to about 4 the fourth day, and then they'd quit for a few days. But that was with the seed. But they didn't chew the seed; they would just eat it whole, and swallow the seeds. So it is somewhat toxic, but you'd have to eat a bunch of them to really do you damage. And at the worst, if you get too much of the toxin, it's like eating too much X-Lax. You'll know when you've done it, and I've done it twice. Don't eat a big plate on an empty stomach. That's the one lesson I learned. And don't steam the leaves. You have to. I mean, all when you're eating pokeweed, all the books will say boil it 2, 3 times. I never once grew up and having it boiled twice. We collected the shoots when they were about 6 to 8 inches tall and just ate the whole shoot. If it was about 2 feet tall, then she'd just collect the tops. As my mom, taught me a lot of this stuff from infancy, basically. But every now and then, if it gets up above knee high, I'll take just the tops. But those I will blanch first, rinse it, and then boil it, and then rinse it again. I do recommend rinsing after boiling. That was my mom's tip, is always rinse it afterwards. But I've never gotten just in the standard preparation of just boiling it once with small plants, or maybe a blanch or 2 boils with the plants up to, almost not quite waist high, but when they start forming a lot of purple on the stalk, that's when you need to quit.
All right, well, I think we'll all be over for a sampling of all the delicious food.
And you guys are located where?
St. Louis.
Well, I have a St. Louis tour coming up in June. I don't have it all on my calendar yet, but it starts out in Columbia, I'm doing an edible plant walk there for some friends of ours that we did a couple of years ago, and we did it for 2 years. Me and Rachel West, she runs Eating the Ozarks. She does a lot of that stuff in this area too. We put on a forager certification course. It was a 3 weekend course, and we tested on 10 native and 10 non-native plants, and wrote up a little certification. Didn't mean anything other than having our names on it, because there's no bureaucratic framework to offer anything like that, like there is with mushrooms. The Missouri Mycological Society has a good certification program with that now. But anyway, that's uh, that's a good thing to really get into it.
Oh, we've really enjoyed this, and we look forward to meeting you at our state conference in June. So we'll get to meet you in person.
Yeah, I forgot the dates on that.
Yeah.
What is the date in June?
12th, 13th, and 14th of June.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I think I'm only there on let's see. Yeah, I'm there on the 13th.
Maybe Michael Meredith can send those dates over to you so that we can
Yeah.
move
We
to
have,
the next agenda item.
Well, the weekend before the conference is the weekend I will be up there, and I'll be in Columbia the 5th. I'll be in Campsville, Illinois, which is the McCullough Heritage Project site, on the 6th. I'll be at the Warren Levis Boy Scout Camp, just a little bit north of St. Louis, on the 7th. And on the 8th, there's a lady that does this stuff that was in our foraging certification course. She has a business called Therapeo, and it's just a little bit, I think, a little bit east of St. Louis. And that's
All
the
right.
8th. So that whole weekend I'll be up there, and plenty of chances for y'all to come and do a walk.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Right.
thank you.
You good? Can I get out of here now?
Yep. You can hang up.
All
Unless you
right, I
want
want
to
to go. I want to go cook a salmon.
Okay. Enjoy.
Thank you all so much. Bye bye.
Oh.
Bye-bye.